As I speak to you right now, I am breaking the law. I'm a criminal, an outlaw. I'm a very naughty boy. My crime? Riding a privately owned e-scooter in public. This particular scooter is made by a brand called Naught. It's called the One, British brand, and despite the fact that in every measurable way it is a safer and superior product to the ride-sharing scooters that you can legally ride in public, this, by law, is restricted to private land only. And that's really dumb. Thankfully, Naught aren't just scooter makers, they are lobbyists as well, and they've been working the government hard trying to get this outdated legislation changed at long last. And they reckon they're getting pretty close. But what does safe e-scooter legalisation look like? And why do we even need these things? Welcome to Everything Electric Tech.
Our 3 free YouTube channels on EVs and clean energy tech are funded by our fun-packed test drive-tastic events in the North, West and Greater London, and our events down under. Next up, Everything Electric Sydney 2026. Plus, check out everythingelectric.store for merch and much more. Back to the episode.
So Ollie, you started by selling electric scooters, then you've made your own one, but you've also been working with the government to change the law around them. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, that's a big factor. Obviously, the law here in the UK is a bit of a sticking point, if you like. Electric scooters became very popular, sort of 2018-19. COVID really accelerated that because people thought it was a great innovative way to get about, sort of avoid public transport. But unfortunately, the reality is in the UK at the minute, strictly speaking, private e-scooters, like we see here, or just behind, are technically illegal to ride on the road as they're effectively classed as a motor vehicle. And it doesn't look anything like it, but that is the reality. So a lot of Europe and the wider world have brought in legislation. It's not uncommon for legislation to sort of drag behind innovation and technology. But in the UK, we're still in this sort of middle ground where government haven't fully brought in legislation for private e-scooters. We've got rental schemes in our various towns and cities. So a bit like people see sort of the Boris bikes or Santander bikes as they're now known, but it not brought in proper legislation for private e-scooters, which is what we're pushing because a lot of people have their own bikes, have their own e-bikes. Why can't they have their own e-scooter?
I completely agree. So when you say pushing, what have you been doing exactly?
So we've been pushing the government to bring in legislation, not just simply telling them they need to bring legislation, but also telling them how it can look, what they can do, take examples for other parts of the world. Much of Europe have brought in legislation. Germany, sort of a country we always sort of reference ourselves sort of being very strict, proper, straight. They've done it. They've done it quite well in terms of having their license plates, third-party insurance, because that's a concern people have here in the UK. So we've told them how it can be done. We've sort of also pushed them on things like minimum safety standards, things like batteries, because that's sort of an issue thing we see in tabloid newspapers. E-bikes, scooters explode, and the reality is you've got to look under the surface of why that's happened. There's always a reason. Is it a low quality battery? Is it because somebody's modified it themselves? But if they bring proper safety regulation in, so anything that's imported into the country meets critical safety standards, that would benefit everybody.
And you of course are in the process of launching your own brand and your very own e-scooter, which you have designed. Would it be fair to say then that you are fairly confident that legalisation is coming soon and somewhat gambling on it arriving in the near future?
Yeah, you can certainly say that, and people obviously always denote back to the fact that we've got an invested interest in it, and I can't deny that, but I'll always hark back to the reason I got into it in the first place is because it's a genuinely better way to get about. Where scooters really excel is that sort of last mile commute, 2-3 mile journeys. It makes a lot of sense, especially in our urban environments. An interesting statistic is 67% of all car journeys in urban environments are less than 3 miles, 18% of those less than 1. So that's where the scooter really excels.
Now then, quick tour of the Nought One. What are the various features that they've implemented with this scooter that they think all scooters should by law have? Well, there's a few. First of all, 10-inch tyres. Minimum 10-inch diameter, nothing smaller than that, but also having actual tyres instead of just a ring of plastic around the wheels, as some really, really cheap scooters do, give you a little bit of squish, a little bit of suspension. The battery pack, which sits in the deck here, IP65 water resistant. That's quite important, isn't it? As someone who has had an electric skateboard go up in flames quite spectacularly, when your battery is that near the floor, you do want the water resistance. So that's good, that should absolutely be mandatory. This is quite nice. we've got indicators. Oh, I've got a brake light. I've got a headlight. All of which Naught says should be mandatory by law on any privately owned e-scooter that's used on the road. I'm inclined to agree. Of course, you can't really stick your hand out while scooting. They're not quite as stable as bikes, so you do want indicators. And then the final thing is independent mechanical front and rear brakes. Some scooters have electronic braking, regen braking, that's fine, but Naught says you should at least have proper physical brakes for the front and rear, just to ensure that even if something fails electronically, you can still stop. And then in terms of additional nice to have features that Naught have added because they think they're nice to have, we've got a lovely crisp OLED screen here. We've got a removable battery pack. It's good for about 25 miles of range. Idea being, if you want to scoot further, carry an extra battery with you, or more to the point, if you live up a really nasty flight of stairs, maybe you just leave your scooter in the hallway, take the battery up to charge that in the comfort of your own home. This is nice as well. We've got foldability, of course we do. That's the point of scooters. But what's quite cool about this one, well, first of all, not too heavy, 20 kilos, manageable. But I like this, look, you can lean it on its end. That's quite handy. That's good, compact storage. That's not going to take up too much room in your flat, is it? I like that. And what I like about this is they've not overdone it. It's still a fairly straightforward, affordable electric scooter. Some people might say, well, hang on, what about bigger wheels so you can deal with potholes better? What about suspension? Shouldn't those be mandatory features? And not say, well, actually, if you add all this stuff, you end up with something that's big and heavy and kind of like a bicycle. The point of scooters is they have that portability. And if that means that you might feel a bit wibbly wobbly riding alongside a Range Rover on the road, that's only a reflection of the fact that micromobility shouldn't be sharing road space with big vehicles. I absolutely agree with that.
So this is the micromobility roadmap. So it's commissioned by the government, but in tandem with Warwick University. So they've sort of worked at how potential legislation could look. So when we talked about things like maximum motor size, speed, etc., indicators, that's based on this document, if you like. So it's not necessarily concrete, but it does give a really good guide. So it covers a number of things, you know, how it can look in terms of legislation, you know, size, weight of vehicles. Covers another aspect in here, which is sort of slightly larger vehicles, so things like e-cargo bikes, e-cargo scooters. So, you know, that's obviously a bigger, heavier item, needs a bit more power, so how legislation could look there.
Which is currently a sort of bit of a black spot in e-bike legislation, isn't it? There's no special accommodations for heavier cargo bikes that need more power.
No, exactly, and that's something that needs to be addressed as well, because mainstream couriers are looking at using this, because again, they're seeing that micromobility is a great way to get around their towns and cities, you know, for the sort of smaller parcels. We're also reliant on our online orders now. The couriers are inundated, and for town and cities it makes a lot of sense.
What about enforcing rider behaviour then? If you see someone zipping along, what's the best way of ensuring that people are riding them safely, not taking them on the pavements, not going way too fast?
I think this is obviously a slightly difficult point, because the scooter per se, you know, that you can regulate, it's brilliant, but with anything that's got human operation, the human is a factor in how they want to behave, and B is down to them. The way Germany have done it is, for example, they've got little license plates, so you've got to have to get that, you've got to sort of apply for that, but it's only applicable for pre-approved products. So certain scooters with particularly high power, high speed obviously won't obtain that. And also, obviously, that gives them an element of trackability. You know, I'm not saying that just because somebody goes on the pavement because they speed, they're instantly going to get caught. You know, in the same way, if somebody runs a red light in a car, that doesn't guarantee they're going to get caught. But if there's cameras, if there's people about, it certainly increases that. And then obviously with that license plate, it gives some accountability, some tracking. And also if it's clear where everybody needs to go on the road in, you know, pre-designated cycle lanes or scooter lanes, as they should be, that's the best place for them. People know where they should be. Pedestrians know where scooters should be. Everybody's clear, you know, and also if they do break the rules, there should be, you know, severe punishments. I think if a cyclist runs a red light, which, you know, we've all seen, supposedly it is a £50 fine. You know, will that ever happen? Will it not happen? If you whacked it up, just say 500 quid, for example, you know, it's more of a deterrent. You know, you're never going to stop people ultimately, you know, breaking rules, but if there's a strong deterrent, you know, in place, it will make people think hopefully twice about what they're going to do.
I'm not sure if I want number plates. I would quite like them to be treated simply like bicycles, which they fundamentally are. They're small vehicles that have a fairly low top speed. But the reason I consider it as an option is there does appear to be this perception issue with scooters. There's a kind of a stigma around them as a technology. I'm of the opinion that that's been brought about by the fact that they're illegal, which has meant that people who are using them are doing so knowingly illegally. So why not blow through that red light? I'm already breaking the law. And additionally, I think there's a stigma around them being low quality products. I think that's again because people are afraid of having them confiscated. So they're buying low quality products, ones that might catch fire if they get wet, or might chuck you over the handlebars because they don't have good pneumatic tyres. How do you feel about the kind of perception of e-scooters in the UK?
Yeah, I don't think that's helped, and obviously we're used to our sort of tabloid newspapers who like to put a sort of blaring headline to grab the reader's attention, sometimes not necessarily displaying the full story. With the battery aspect, for example, that only happens with low quality batteries or people modifying them. High quality battery, that would never happen. People probably aren't aware of how day to day they are exposed to lithium ion batteries in a whole number of technologies. So that's one side. But the riders and people breaking the rules, there is that aspect, and that's why sort of there needs to be adequate punishment for those people.
Do you feel that our cities in the UK are adequately prepared for mass uptake of micromobility? If everyone bought an e-scooter tomorrow because they became legal, do you think our road network is set up for that? Or do you think that we need to make some adjustments and maybe make roads slightly less hospitable to cars in order to facilitate more micromobility in the future?
The reason micromobility is so great and the way it works is because it's genuinely the best way to get about. London is massively congested. I think the average motorist spends, I think it's 110 hours a year in traffic. It's a huge cost to the economy, it's wasted time. So micromobility makes a lot of sense. Cars have got bigger, heavier, and take up more road space. So, people on micromobility do feel maybe a bit vulnerable, with such big vehicles. So if we can have better segregation, more infrastructure, bike lanes, scooter lanes, pedestrians on one side, and I know people do still have to use cars, couriers, etc. in towns and cities, but only when they really need to.
So, key takeaways from today. I have two main ones. First one I was already very clear on, which is that e-scooters are great. These things have a separate use case to e-bikes and bicycles. We could use all of them in our cities, in our societies. I can't really have a bicycle where I live because I live on a massive hill and I don't want to be sweaty every time I arrive somewhere. But I can't really have an e-bike either because I can't lock it up outside, it'll get nicked. I can't take it upstairs, the stairs are too narrow, got no room for it in the flat. For me, an e-scooter is the perfect last mile solution, and for so many other people too. We are missing out by not having these on our streets. But my second takeaway from speaking to Ollie is it's not rocket science. It's not that complicated. I feel like we're overthinking this legislation. You give them a sensible speed limit and you punish people that ride them like dicks. That's really all you need to do. We've seen it work elsewhere. I want to see it in the UK sooner rather than later because it's taken too long to get things changed. And like I said, we're missing out. So there we go, the Nought One. Big credit to these guys for doing the Lord's work and lobbying the government. Not an easy task. I wish them every success. Let us know in the comments, would you be tempted to buy an e-scooter if they were legalised tomorrow? Do you already have one that you benefit from in your daily life? Let us know down below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have been, thanks for watching.